Ever wonder what people ate when the crops failed? Could you survive if the grocery stores closed tomorrow? During the Middle Ages, ordinary folks had to know which wild plants could keep them alive when famine struck, and their knowledge might just blow your mind. Number 12. Stinging nettle, the medieval superfood. Ouch. Have you ever brushed against a plant that left your skin burning and covered in tiny red bumps? That stinging nettle, and medieval people actually harvested this painful plant on purpose. Stinging nettle might seem like nature's cruel joke, but once cooked, those nasty stinging hairs completely disappear. Medieval families would gather young nettle shoots in spring wearing thick gloves or using sticks to knock the plants into baskets. They boiled the leaves to create a nutritious, spinach-like vegetable absolutely packed with vitamins A and C, iron, protein, and calcium. During the hungry gap of late winter and early spring when stored foods ran low, nettle soup became a literal lifesaver. Peasants would combine the nettles with whatever they had on hand, perhaps a few old turnips, some dried beans, or if they were lucky, a ham bone to flavor the broth. The resulting soup provided crucial nutrition just when the body needed it most after the long winter months. Medieval healers also used nettle tea to treat everything from arthritis to seasonal allergies. The plant was so valued that some families actually cultivated patches near their homes, despite the obvious downsides of keeping a stinging plant around. Even the fibrous stems were used, processed similarly to flax to create a linen-like fabric for clothing and rope. When you think about it, stinging nettle perfectly represents medieval survival knowledge, transforming something dangerous and unwelcoming into a multi-purpose resource that could feed, heal, and clothe a family. Number 11. Acorns, the emergency flower. Did you know that the same nuts squirrels stash for winter once fed humans throughout Europe? Acorns were medieval Europe's backup plan when grain harvests failed. Unlike the sweet chestnuts that roasted on holiday fires, acorns contain bitter tannins that make them inedible when raw. Medieval people developed a clever process to transform these abundant tree nuts into food. After gathering acorns in fall, they would crack the shells and grind the nuts into coarse flour. This flour was then repeatedly soaked in water, often in streams or rivers, to leach out the bitter tannins. The resulting acorn flour couldn't make a light, fluffy bread like wheat, but it could stretch wheat flour in times of scarcity or be made into a porridge that would keep hunger at bay. Some communities even roasted processed acorns as a coffee-like drink, centuries before coffee reached Europe. One medieval household record from a particularly difficult famine year notes that the family survived 3 months on bread made with 2 parts acorn meal to 1 part barley flour, supplemented with wild greens and occasional meat from hunting. The writer noted that while nobody particularly enjoyed the bread's heavy texture and slightly sweet taste, it kept life in our bodies when many neighbors perished. Oak trees were so valued for their food potential that in some regions, destroying an oak was a serious crime. A single mature oak can produce up to 500 pounds of acorns in a good year, enough to create significant amounts of food. While most medieval families preferred their cultivated grains, knowing how to process acorns meant having insurance against the all-too-common threat of starvation. Number 10. Dandelion, the medieval multi-tool. Are you constantly battling those yellow flowers in your lawn? The plant you're treating as a weed was once treasured as a complete food source from root to flower. Dandelions were so valued in medieval Europe that they weren't considered weeds at all. People actually transplanted them into garden spaces for easier harvesting. The young leaves, gathered in early spring before flowering, formed the base of salads and soups. Rich in vitamins A and C, these bitter greens helped prevent scurvy and other deficiency diseases after the vitamin-poor winter months. The bright yellow flowers weren't just pretty, they were collected to make dandelion wine, a sweet, mildly alcoholic beverage that was often one of the first celebratory drinks of spring. Medieval herbalists documented the process, which involved steeping the blossoms in water with sugar, citrus, and sometimes spices, then allowing the mixture to ferment. Even the roots had their uses. Young roots could be roasted and ground as a coffee substitute, while older, thicker roots were sometimes boiled like parsnips. The milky sap that oozes from broken dandelion stems was applied to warts and skin conditions. Perhaps most importantly, dandelions appear very early in the growing season, sometimes as soon as February in milder regions of Europe. This made them a crucial hunger breaker when winter stores ran low but other plants hadn't yet begun growing. One account from a monastery garden keeper in the 13th century notes that the appearance of the first dandelion leaves was greeted with more joy than the finest feast day, for it means we shall soon eat fresh food again. Number 9. Chickweed, nature's salad bar. Have you spotted that delicate plant with tiny white star-like flowers growing in your garden beds? What you might consider a pesky weed was once gathered by the handful as a daily vegetable. Chickweed earned its place in medieval food culture by being both abundant and available nearly year-round in most of Europe. This unassuming plant grows low to the ground in sprawling mats and can even continue growing under snow in mild winters. For peasant families, chickweed offered fresh greens during seasons when garden vegetables were unavailable. With a mild, slightly sweet flavor reminiscent of corn silk, chickweed was eaten raw in salads or cooked briefly like spinach. Its tender stems, leaves, and even the tiny flowers are completely edible. Medieval households would send children out to gather handfuls of chickweed as an easy chore, one that added crucial nutrition to the family pot. Beyond its food value, chickweed earned a reputation as a healing plant. The same properties that make it juicy and crisp when eaten fresh were valued for soothing irritated skin. Crushed chickweed was applied as a poultice to rashes, minor burns, and itchy insect bites. Some midwives used chickweed tea to boost milk production in new mothers. Medieval medical texts refer to chickweed as starweed or starwort due to its tiny star-shaped flowers, recommending it for conditions ranging from constipation to eye inflammation. One 14th century manuscript suggests that a daily handful of chickweed in the diet cools the blood and brings cheer to the heart, an early recognition of the connection between nutrition and mood. Number 8. Elderberry, the medieval medicine cabinet. Could a common roadside shrub really help medieval people fight disease? When illness swept through villages, elderberry was often the first line of defense. Elder trees with their flat-topped clusters of creamy flowers followed by dark purple berries were considered almost magical in medieval Europe. Families would protect elder shrubs growing near their homes, considering them lucky. The plant's various parts were used throughout the year, from the fragrant blossoms of early summer to the rich berries of late summer and fall. Elder flowers were gathered when fully open, but before they began to brown. These delicate blooms were infused into water or wine to create a sweet, aromatic drink believed to reduce fevers and fight colds. Some families made elder flower fritters by dipping the flower heads in batter and frying them, a special treat that marked the beginning of summer. But it was elderberries that earned the greatest reputation for fighting illness. The deep purple berries were cooked into syrups and wines that medieval healers prescribed for everything from coughs to fluid retention. Modern research has actually confirmed what medieval people knew through observation: elderberry extracts can boost the immune system and have antiviral properties. During the devastating plague outbreaks, demand for elderberry remedies became so high that some communities appointed special guardians for their elder trees to prevent overharvesting. One account from a monastery during the 1348 Black Death outbreak notes that the monks relied heavily on elder reduced berry juice mixed with wine, which seemed to spare those who took it regularly from the worst ravages of the pestilence. What makes the elder story particularly fascinating is how it bridged practical medicine and folk belief. While people used elder preparations as actual medicine, many also believed that the elder housed protective spirits. Furniture made from elder wood was avoided, but medicine tools like syrup strainers were often crafted from elder branches to enhance the healing properties of whatever passed through them. Number 7. Burdock, the forgotten root vegetable. Ever had those annoying burrs stick to your clothing during a walk? The plant they come from was once cultivated as food across medieval Europe. Burdock, with its massive leaves and clingy seed heads, was a staple wild food that eventually made its way into monastery and castle gardens. The primary food part of burdock is its substantial taproot, which can grow over 3 feet long and as thick as a child's arm. Young first-year roots were harvested in late autumn and stored in cool, damp conditions similar to carrots. Medieval cooks prepared burdock roots by scrubbing away the outer skin and then slicing the white flesh for soups and stews. The flavor resembles a cross between potato and artichoke, with a slightly sweet, earthy quality. Because burdock contains inulin, a prebiotic fiber, not insulin, it doesn't spike blood sugar but creates a satisfying fullness of valuable quality during food-scarce periods. Beyond the roots, young burdock stalks were peeled and eaten similar to celery, while the immature flower stalks could be prepared like asparagus. The large leaves, while too bitter for salads, were used to wrap foods for cooking underground with hot stones, an early form of foil packet cooking. Burdock's medicinal uses were equally important in medieval life. The roots were brewed into cleansing teas, believed to purify the blood and enhance liver function. Crushed leaves were applied to burns, scalds, and skin eruptions. So respected was burdock's healing potential that by the late medieval period, physicians at the medical school in Salerno, Italy were prescribing burdock preparations for conditions ranging from joint pain to scalp problems. The plant's transition from wild food to cultivated crop speaks to its importance. Medieval gardeners would deliberately plant burdock in dedicated beds despite its tendency to spread aggressively. They knew that having this calorie-dense root vegetable available could make the difference between subsistence and starvation during harsh winters or crop failures. Number 6. Hawthorne, the heart's protector. See those thorny trees with white spring flowers and red fall berries. Their fruits once filled hungry bellies when bread ran short. Hawthorne trees, formidable with their sharp thorns but generous with their berries, were valued as both food and medicine throughout medieval Europe. The small red fruits, called haws, ripened in autumn just as many other wild foods were disappearing, providing a crucial late-season resource. While not as immediately delicious as blackberries or apples, hawthorn berries have a mealy, slightly sweet flesh surrounding several hard seeds. Medieval people would gather the berries after the first frost, which sweetened them slightly, and use them to stretch more precious foods. Hawthorn berries could be dried and ground into a powder that was added to flour, or cooked into a thick paste that preserved their nutrition through winter. The young spring leaves of hawthorn were another food source, tender enough to be added to salads and actually quite nutritious. Some communities called these leaves bread and cheese, not because they tasted like those foods, but because they helped fill the stomach when actual bread and cheese were scarce. Hawthorn's most significant role, however, was medicinal. By the 13th century, European healers had recognized hawthorn's effects on the cardiovascular system. The berries, flowers, and leaves were all used to create teas and tinctures for treating what they described as dropsical conditions and weakness of the heart, what we now recognize as congestive heart failure and similar conditions. Modern research has confirmed hawthorn contains compounds that can improve heart function and blood flow. Medieval monasteries often had hawthorn trees planted near their infirmaries specifically for medicinal use. The 12th century mystic and herbalist Hildegard of Bingen wrote that hawthorn gladdens the heart and recommended it for treating what she called hardening of the heart, possibly referring to arterial plaque or heart failure symptoms. Number 5. Pine, not just for Christmas. Did you know people once ate parts of pine trees to survive winter? When other foods disappeared, these evergreens provided emergency nutrition that saved countless lives. Pine trees represent one of medieval Europe's most overlooked food sources. During severe famines, knowledge of how to process and consume various pine parts often determined who survived and who didn't. The inner bark, particularly from Scots pine and white pine, contains edible cambium, a thin layer that can be scraped out and dried, then ground into a flour substitute. This pine flower was notoriously bitter and resinous, but contained calories and some nutrition when nothing else was available. Historical records from Northern Europe document several instances where entire communities subsisted on bark bread during crop failures, mixing whatever grain they had with processed pine bark to create more filling loaves. Beyond the emergency food of inner bark, pine trees offered other edible parts. Young male pine cones, collected in spring before they harden, can be boiled into a sweet, nutritious syrup. The green pine needles, rich in vitamin C, were steeped into teas that helped prevent scurvy during winter months when fresh fruits and vegetables were unavailable. Some medieval communities even collected pine pollen in spring, a protein-rich powder that could be added to porridge. Perhaps most valuable were pine nuts, harvested from certain species like the stone pine. These calorie-dense nuts were collected from fallen cones each autumn and provided crucial fat and protein. Unlike the inner bark, pine nuts were considered a delicacy. Records show they appeared on noble tables and in monastery kitchens for special feast days. Medieval woodland communities developed specific tools for harvesting pine resources, including specialized bark spuds designed to remove bark strips without killing the tree. This sustainable harvesting approach allowed families to return to the same trees year after year. The ability to use pine trees as a food source was so valued in northern regions that Finnish wedding traditions included testing a bride's knowledge of bark bread preparation to ensure she could help the family survive difficult times. Number 4. Cattail, the supermarket of the swamp. Ever pass those tall, brown hot dog on a stick plants growing in wetlands? Medieval people viewed these common plants as an entire grocery store. Cattails might be the most versatile wild edible known to medieval Europeans, offering different foods almost year-round. Every part of the plant is edible at some stage of growth, earning cattails the nickname nature's supermarket among modern foragers, a concept medieval people understood perfectly well. In early spring, the young shoots could be pulled up and the tender white bases eaten raw or cooked like asparagus. As the plants grew, the immature flower spikes that would eventually become the familiar brown cattails could be harvested, peeled, and boiled or roasted. Many described their flavor as similar to corn on the cob. The pollen that appears on mature male cattail flowers was meticulously collected by dusting cloth bags over the plants. This bright yellow pollen is remarkably nutritious and up to 20% protein by weight. It was mixed with regular flour to boost nutrition or used to thicken stews. Some communities even made a form of unleavened bread using cattail pollen during famines. Perhaps most important were the starch-rich rhizomes, underwater stems, that connect cattail plants beneath the mud. These could be harvested year-round, but were especially sought after in winter when other foods were scarce. Medieval people would wade into icy marshes, loosen the rhizomes with digging sticks, and pull up lengths that could be processed to extract pure white starch. The process of extracting cattail starch was labor-intensive but valuable. The rhizomes were washed, peeled, and then pounded in water to release the starch, which would settle to the bottom of containers. This starch could be used like flour or dried into storable cakes. Historical records from Eastern Europe document communities that relied heavily on cattail starch during the hunger months of early spring when stored grains were depleted. Beyond food, cattails provided materials for everyday life: leaves for weaving mats and baskets, seed fluff for stuffing pillows and insulating clothing, and dried stalks for fueling fires. The plants were so valued that some medieval communities established specific harvest rights in local marshes, and disputes over cattail gathering areas occasionally appear in court records. Number 3. Lamb's quarters, the wild spinach. Have you walked past this weed growing in disturbed soil without realizing it's more nutritious than anything in your vegetable garden? For medieval families, this unassuming plant was daily fare throughout the growing season. Lamb's quarters, also called goosefoot for its distinctive leaf shape, grows abundantly in disturbed soil, meaning it volunteered wherever humans worked the earth. Gardens, field edges, and abandoned lots would erupt with these mineral-rich plants, providing free vegetables with no cultivation required. Medieval people recognized lamb's quarters as superior to many garden vegetables in both flavor and nutrition. The young leaves taste similar to spinach, but with a milder flavor that doesn't cause the same mouth-drying sensation. Modern nutritional analysis has confirmed what medieval people knew through experience: lamb's quarters contains more iron, protein, and vitamins than cultivated spinach. Throughout spring and summer, households would gather the tender growth tips of lamb's quarters for cooking. The leaves could be eaten raw in small quantities, but were typically boiled briefly to remove trace amounts of oxalic acid. Some regions mixed lamb's quarters with sorrel and other wild greens to create soup mixtures that balanced the flavors of different plants. As the plant matured, it produced thousands of tiny black seeds that could be collected by bending the seed heads into baskets and stripping them with the fingers. These protein-rich seeds were ground into flour or cooked like a grain similar to quinoa, to which lamb's quarters is related. During severe grain shortages, these seeds sometimes became a crucial alternative food source. Medieval gardeners had an interestingly dual approach to lamb's quarters. They would weed out most plants to protect their cultivated crops, but often left a few robust specimens to grow to maturity for seed harvest. This semi-wild cultivation created a reliable supply without requiring dedicated garden space. The plant was so integral to medieval peasant diets that it appears in numerous household records and herbal texts. A German manuscript from the 14th century advises that lamb's quarters should be gathered regularly throughout summer and eaten to maintain strength for field work, noting that those who consume it regularly suffer less from summer fevers, likely an observation about its high mineral content supporting those doing physical labor. Number 2. Wild garlic, the spring tonic. Have you ever walked through woodlands in early spring and detected a powerful onion scent? Medieval people followed their noses to find one of spring's most prized wild foods. Wild garlic, also called ramsons, creates spectacular green carpets across woodland floors in early spring, often appearing while patches of snow still linger. The broad, lily-like leaves emerge well before most other spring growth, making them both easy to identify and incredibly valuable as one of the first fresh greens after winter. For medieval communities, the appearance of wild garlic marked a crucial moment in the seasonal food calendar. After months of stored foods and limited nutrition, these vitamin-rich leaves helped restore health and energy. Villagers would make special trips to known wild garlic patches, carefully harvesting leaves while leaving the bulbs to regrow year after year. The flavor of wild garlic falls somewhere between domestic garlic and onions, with a fresher, greener taste. Medieval cooks used the leaves in almost everything during their brief growing season, chopped into soups, layered into breads, wrapped around meats for roasting, or pounded into spring versions of pesto-like sauces. Beyond flavor, wild garlic was valued for its medicinal properties. Like its cultivated cousin, wild garlic has antimicrobial qualities that medieval healers recognized through observation. Spring tonics of wild garlic were prepared to cleanse the blood after winter, a practice that likely did help boost immune function and fight infections. The bulbs, while smaller than cultivated garlic, were sometimes harvested selectively and preserved in vinegar or salt to extend their usefulness beyond the short growing season. However, most communities had strict customs about leaving the majority of bulbs untouched to ensure future harvests, understanding the ecology of the plant centuries before formal science would explain it. Wild garlic was so integrated into seasonal eating patterns that it features in numerous folk traditions and calendars. In parts of Central Europe, the first Sunday after wild garlic emerged was celebrated with special meals featuring the plant. Medieval monastery gardens often had dedicated ramson corners, where the plants were transplanted from nearby woods to ensure a reliable supply for both cooking and medicine. Number 1. Blackberries, nature's candy with benefits. Were medieval peasants actually healthier than you in some ways? When summer brought ripe blackberries to every hedgerow and woodland edge, people consumed nature's multivitamins by the handful. Blackberries represent perhaps the perfect intersection of delicious flavor and medicinal value in medieval wild foods. Unlike some foraged plants that required special preparation or acquired taste, blackberries were immediately appealing, sweet, juicy, and abundant through late summer and early autumn. Medieval communities organized significant berry gathering expeditions when blackberries ripened. Entire families would participate, collecting the fruits in every available container. Records from manor houses show servants were sometimes given specific holidays for berry gathering, recognizing the importance of this free food source. Fresh blackberries were consumed immediately, a rare sweet treat in a diet that had little refined sugar. Beyond eating them fresh, medieval households preserved blackberries through various methods. Berries were dried in the sun on cloths similar to raisins, cooked into long-lasting syrups, or fermented into wine and vinegar. By processing the fruits differently, families created diverse food products from a single source. The medicinal applications of blackberries were equally important. The young leaves were brewed into astringent teas used to treat diarrhea and digestive upset, an application modern science has validated by identifying tannins and other compounds with antimicrobial properties. The root bark was used to treat more serious digestive ailments. Medieval medical texts recommend blackberry preparations for everything from mouth sores to wounds. One 13th century Welsh medical manuscript prescribes a gargle of blackberry leaf tea for throat inflammations and suggests washing wounds with the same preparation. The berries themselves were recognized as particularly beneficial for recovering patients, with one monastic hospital record noting that blackberry syrup returns strength to those weakened by fever. Beyond the fruit, flowers, and leaves, even the thorny canes had uses in medieval households. The long, arching stems were sometimes harvested, dried, and woven into small baskets or used as natural pins to secure thatch roofing. Blackberries featured prominently in folklore too, with numerous superstitions about when they should be gathered. Many European communities believed blackberries shouldn't be picked after Michaelmas, September 29th, because the devil was said to spit on them, a folk belief that actually aligns with the practical reality that late berries often become infected with mold as autumn dampness increases. What would you do if you couldn't run to the grocery store or pharmacy? Could these forgotten foods still save lives today if our modern food systems failed?